Alright guys, no funny jokes today. Humor's overrated, so let's just get right into it. Today I want to talk to you about voice leading. So what is voice leading? Well, at its very core, voice leading is the way you treat each of your voices, whether it's all of the voices being all of the notes in a single chord, all three of those notes, or every instrument across the band, and how they move from one note to the next. Often, the smaller the movement, the better things are going to sound, especially when you are working within the context of a single instrument. So, at its very core, let's look at this example, right? We've got something that goes, if we're in, let's say, D minor, like that, and we do something like, at the same time, we wind up with something like this. And you can see each of these voices, all two of them, moving a single fret at a time to give you those sounds. And so when we play this across a bigger scope, we're going to be moving our chords from chord tone to chord tone, and we're going to try and move the notes as little as we possibly can, right? And a really good example of this is a common series of what's called 1-4-5 movements, right? Which is basically the 1 chord, then the 4 chord, then the 5 chord, and then back to 1. It's a very familiar sound. Just like that. And so we're going to take a look at these. When you're in the root position chord, the closest 4 chord is keeping on the same root fret. You're going to go up to the 2nd inversion chord. Like that. So we've got, if we're, we've got root, 3rd, 5th, and then we stay with that as the lowest note, 5th, root, 3rd, and then from there we're going to go to the closest 5 chord, which is the 1st inversion chord. So we drop down a half step, and then that's going to drop a 3rd, and this will drop a 2nd for 3rd, 5th, root. And you can hear it, this sounds a lot smoother than doing this. That's perfectly viable, but that's a lot of motion and it just doesn't sound as clean to me. And each inversion has its own series of, very close voice leading things. So you can check out the exercises on my Patreon page to find all of them listed out. As the chords get a little bit more advanced, that's when, in my opinion, voice leading starts to become a lot of fun. You can really see this in action in a lot of my parts in the Geth album, such as this particular chord progression from our song Macrobrushes. Now let's take a look at this hand by hand, right? In the bass side, got this 9th here, that's the root and the 9th, and then the 2nd chord, the 9th comes down a minor 3rd to that B, from that D to the B, and the top note just drops a single half step. And then coming into the 3rd chord, the top note drops another single half step, and this time the bass is leaping up a 6th instead of dropping down a 3rd. I could do this. But this is fine as well. The two voices that are going to have the most leeway for how big they can leap are the two outer voices, the top one and the bottom one. Especially the bass voice has a lot of leeway in how much more it can leap and still sound really tight than the top voice would. So again, very little motion between the chords. And when we add the treble side to it, between the first and second chord, I'm only moving a single note up a whole step. This note is coming up that whole step there. And then, so we got here, then it stays exactly the same in the right hand, and then my first finger, which has barred these two notes, will slide those up a half step. So overall, aside from that bass leap of a minor sixth, nothing is moving more than a minor third. In fact, most things are moving less than that. Most things are at most moving a single whole step. Later on in the song, I wind up reharmonizing and coming back to the same chord progression, but with different voicings. Now, if we condense those voicings, it's pretty similar motion. Let's take a look at the left hand, right? Starting with that ninth again, and down to that same motion. The top note moves a single half step, and the bottom note moves a minor third. Now we're going to change it up a little bit. This lowest note is going to jump down there, and now I have a little bit more motion. I jump up a major third, but it's still pretty tight, and I drop it back a half step, and that's just in the left hand. In the right hand, or I'm sorry, the bass side, in the treble side, start here, and then I keep this top note exactly the same. The middle note moves down a half step, and the bottom note moves down a minor third. Finally, the last note, the last chord, has the most motion in it. The bottom note is going to jump up a whole fourth, a perfect fourth. The top note is going to jump up a minor third, and the middle note only moves a half step. Just like that. So all together. Put the chords, both hands together. So what you have are these really strange chords that don't particularly function together in a key, but they sound very smooth because the voice leading is keeping everything tight. And this is actually a kind of fun thing about voice leading. I believe that you can stick any chord with any note in it next to another chord with any note in it, and as long as the voice leading is tight and solid, then it's going to sound pretty cool. And I think this is a good example of that. I do a similar thing. I keep it a little bit more in key, but in my part from Back from Space Earth, in the B section there, I do a similar thing. So let's take a look at this, right? I've got these two notes that are a fifth apart on the bass side. Then they move up close, you know, the top note moves up to a minor third up, and the bottom note only moves a whole step. And then I hammer on that note a half step up. Then I move this whole shape down a half step, and do the same thing I did up here. Got that minor sixth, and then I finish it up there, and then move that whole thing down a major third. So none of my notes are moving more than a major third here. In the right hand, I'm going like this. So after that initial one, there's a bit of a jump here between the initial two chords, right? The top note moves up a minor third, and the bottom note winds up moving up a whole perfect fourth. And then, nothing beyond that is going to move a more than a major third. Right? And when you put them all together, you get these, these descriptive, colorful chords that weave in and out of each other as the voices, move back and forth and move against one another. So that's really the core of voice leading. You're just trying to look at be very deliberate with how small the distances between one chord to the next are in your hands. It does a couple of things for you. It sounds really cool. I think that voice leading, like really tight voice leading, sounds really, really neat. It's like a smooth sound that makes everything just flow a little bit better. It makes it easier to play. If you don't have to jump your hand around the neck so much, things become a lot easier to play. And it's just a cool test of how well you know your instrument and how well you know music theory. Obviously there are a lot more rules to classical voice leading than what I'm giving you here. This is just a very basic overview. But this is where it starts, and this is how you look at it. And if you want to be in a specific style, if you want to go back to kind of like that more classical or romantic style, then yeah, you should learn the rest of the rules for voice leading. I think they're important to learn anyway, just because it's great to know the rules so that you know how you're breaking them when you decide to. But at the end of the day, if that's not something you want to study, it's not really necessary. You just look at things and you say to yourself, okay, I want to move from a C major chord to a G7 chord. How can I do that? By moving each one of the notes in the chords as little as possible. And that's really all you got to ask yourself. So I hope this was helpful. Take it as you will, and yeah, keep exploring.